Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Better Together podcast. I'm Carol Sundsvold, co-hosting with my partner in business and life, Shawn Sundsvold. Today's guest is Carol Schultz, founder and CEO of Vertical Elevation, columnist, and best-selling author of Powered by People. She's known for helping overwhelmed CEOs get out of the weeds and lead with clarity. With her no-fluff approach and signature Chief of Staff Scaffold system, Carol helps leaders restructure their time, build stronger teams, and take back control of their businesses. Carol, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Better Together.
Thanks, Kelly. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've built a really successful business. You've written best-selling books, and you've developed a proprietary system for leaders. That's a lot, and that's pretty awesome. What originally
Not bad
pulled
at 29
you
years old, huh?
Right? Exactly. Exactly. What originally pulled you into entrepreneurship, and how did that evolve into what you're doing today?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? The high level short version is I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Entrepreneurship was nothing new for me. I, of course, have worked for some companies, and when I started out in the search industry in 1992, I worked for a firm for 9 years, and then went back out on my own, back into entrepreneurship, because it just, there are a lot of bad leaders out there.
Yeah.
And, you certainly, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. You have to be prepared to work really hard. And one of the biggest problems with entrepreneurs, and I had this problem myself, was doing everything myself. And it's just super not effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's for sure. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe being my own boss as an entrepreneur, not that I have clients to answer to, but, for me, someone who's driven by the opportunity to make a difference, it, really helps me fulfill that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's really important to have as when you're leading the business and creating things, is that knowledge that you really want to change the lives of other people,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Especially now that you're working with like high performing CEOs every day, they're all kind of in that same boat, right? They're trying to
Mhm.
build something, for lack of a better word, incredible, right? They want to make
Mhm.
that impact, but like everyone else, they're kind of stretched thin.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some of the biggest traps that entrepreneurs fall in when they're trying to scale their companies?
Well, like I said, they try to do too much themselves. That is
Oh, yeah.
the single number one reason. And it's what had me pivot from doing what I was doing, which was I was a professional headhunter for 30 years, working with startups my whole career. So, I like to think I don't know everything about startups, but I know more than the general population, and have seen pretty much every founder make pretty much every mistake there is to make. And that's what launched me into becoming a fractional chief of staff, because CEOs need the expertise and the help that I provide for them, right? So they're in the weeds, as I say, they're a hostage to their company, and they're drowning in 6 inches of water, right? Because they're all trying, and successfully, I might add, to do everything themselves. So many founder CEOs are spending, 50% of their time, even more, on working in their business. So whether it's answering emails, you could hire an executive assistant to do that, right? A fractional executive assistant. That's not work I do, of course, but you can hire somebody to do that for you. I just recommended that to a client of mine not long ago. They are busy in meetings that they really don't need to be in, where somebody like me can go in their place, right?
Mhm.
That's ultimately the biggest trap that CEOs fall into, is trying to do things they really have no business doing.
Yeah. They need to keep their head up and
Yep.
their brain and their hands busy leading the business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into, that common myth of entrepreneurship, is that you have to do it all. Like we joke about like having all the hats, like a marketing hat, an accountant hat. We've shared on this podcast before that like our first hire was an accountant, because numbers are not Shawn and I's thing.
Right.
We're creatives. He's more operational.
That's right.
Yeah. Pass off, delegate the things that you can't,
Mhm.
so that you can grow your business.
Well, and I will say the challenge with that, Kelly, is that what ends up happening, and I just had this conversation with somebody on my podcast who's I've known him many, many, many years. He's a professor at CSU, and an amazing equine surgeon, and he started a company some years ago. And, even himself, he didn't know what he didn't know, right? So what ends up happening is founders often still, and I again, as somebody who had been a professional headhunter, I still made this mistake. right?
Yeah.
Because these were things that were not in my wheelhouse, which
Mm.
was hiring the wrong people, hiring people to do things for me. They turned out to be the wrong people because it was not my area of expertise to even know how to interview them, right?
Yeah.
Like hiring somebody
Yeah.
to do SEO for me. I've had a number of different people do it. I finally hit the right person, and wow, has it made a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Finding that.
huge difference.
Yeah.
Because I don't know squat about SEO. So for somebody like me, it makes it really, really hard. And even my chief of staff, who does most of those initial interviews for me, she doesn't know enough about SEO. She knows about other stuff. So it made that a real challenge for us to find the right person.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur trying to do everything, that is the fastest way to head to burnout.
Yeah.
So what do you find, why do you think so many founders fall into the superhero syndrome? And it's what's costing them, the cost of staying there just too long.
I think there are a number of reasons, Kelly. One of them is some of these people are operating on a shoestring budget. So they become penny wise and pound foolish. And here's my advice to every entrepreneur. If you cannot afford to spend money to hire the right people, don't become an entrepreneur. You will never grow your company. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it'll take you exponentially longer than it would otherwise. That's the first thing. The other thing, and I co-authored an article about this, is founder syndrome. Only I can do it. I am the hero.
Yes.
Right? So often, I mean, this sometimes happens later on in a founder journey, but it's not uncommon where, I mean, I had a conversation with a founder. She's like, yeah, I'm doing 2 full-time jobs. I'm thinking, why are you doing that? And you've got 2 babies at home. How's that working for you? Well, we're bootstrapping. Okay. Well, if you think you can build a business like that, go for it. But I don't know what, listen, a good buddy of mine is one of the partners with Foundry Group. They're very well-known venture capital firm here in Boulder. I've known him a long, long time, over 20 years. And Seth always says, if you don't have to take venture capital, it's really not a good deal for you. So people are now under the impression that they should just be bootstrapping. And that's not necessarily the best way to do it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I mean, if you can bootstrap and get yourself up and running to a certain point, then maybe you need to consider taking institutional capital or going to your bank saying, hey, you know what, we've made this much money. Can we get a $500,000 line of credit? I mean, that's another really effective way for founders to do things. I had a client that said to me that I was, he was thinking about getting private equity. And I thought, in what world do you think private equity is going to invest in your company? It's not going to happen.
I think I love the idea of helping them create options, right? Because I think that happens with founders a lot. They get this vision in their head of where they're supposed to go, right? And I use the word supposed to because that's what's their vision of what is happening. And because of that, they forget all the different options that could be available to them if they would slow down long enough and maybe ask some questions to the right people.
Right.
Which I think also kind of leads into that idea of them being hostages to their business, right? Like I cannot get over that visual. That was so amazing. So like in practice, as we're going through that, what are some signs that a founder has become a hostage to their own company? And what's the conversation you have with them of how to get out of that?
Yeah. So, they're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and the business is not growing. And they're doing lots of other jobs in the business, or they're spending half of their time managing their people. And I had a founder that was doing exactly that. Carol, I'm working 80 to 100 hours a week, her words, and 50% of it is spent managing people. And I just, just shook my head thinking, what are you thinking? The amount of waste. She's now been completely restructured. She had a fractional chief of staff. That person is now full-time. It's been full-time for some time. She spends maybe 10% in her business now. Of her time.
Wow.
So, the conversation is, listen, it's a conversation that somebody like me who's been in sales my whole career asks. It's a conversation somebody that, like me, who started my coaching training in 1998, right? I just ask a lot of questions and find out where their pain is and how it's affecting them, not only professionally, but personally. When I have founders tell me my family is at the bottom of the food chain of everything I have to do. And this is, I've had them tell me this.
Yeah.
They come last. I'm like, yeah, how's that working for your relationship with your wife and your kids?
Yeah.
Like, what's the impact? And that's what that's what I really focus on is the impact on them, the personal impact, right? Because one of my great coaches said to me years ago, you don't have business problems, you have personal problems that show up in your business, And
it's not wrong.
There's great truth to that, isn't
yes,
there?
there is.
Yeah.
So because we can't ultimately keep separate those two things, it's not possible.
Yeah.
You may be able to work hard and minimize some of it, but you cannot keep them separate. So better to get your house in order and learn how to help that flow into your business in a really positive way so that those problems stop limiting you, right?
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So on that, like the entrepreneurship, it often demands a lot of reinvention. We were just talking with someone a couple days ago about how she blew up her business because it wasn't working and she needed to completely restructure. You don't just build it once and just like coast. It's like, I could get more efficient here, or like, this is not working at all. I need to throw this out. What's something that you've had to unlearn or completely shift in your own business over the years?
That's a really good question. There's probably so much. I mean, my biggest shift was realizing I had to stop doing stuff myself to save money.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to keep going back to that, but it's, these are the things that I learned that I now, give to other people because they're having the same problem. But that's ultimately what the issue is. Stop spending your really expensive time doing, $50, $100 hour of work, whatever that is. On things you have no business doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a coach a while back that said, list out everything you do in a day and then list out everything you do in a week and put a dollar sign by it. Is this a $10 an hour job or is this a $100 an hour
it's
job?
the same premise. Exactly.
Yeah. It really makes you like opens your eyes to, okay, you know what? Personally, I love cleaning my house. I love it. I love reorganizing. I know that's not everyone's thing. That's
not
my thing. But should I be doing this?
Yeah.
Like those are
That's
questions, and it ties back to what you're talking about, delegation, and really making sure that you're using your time the wisest.
Right.
And then as soon as you get employees that are relying on that income, you got to really be careful with your time so that they continue to have a livelihood.
That's one of the many reasons I don't do my own cleaning.
Yes. Yes.
I hate it, but I'm good at it. But, I pay somebody about $40 an hour, 38 to 40, depending on how long it takes her to do the house, right? And my time is far more valuable than that.
Yeah.
Far more valuable. I mean, hundreds of dollars more an hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about kind of that transformation that happens, right? Because as a founder or a CEO, you go from like, okay, I'm the only person doing this. I have to be this. I have to be this. I have to be this person. And then there's this process that you go through to eventually become the CEO leading an organization. What's one of the hardest transitions that most founders face beyond just the delegation, right? Because we've talked a lot about that one. And how do you help them navigate it?
I think ultimately founders don't realize especially when it's their first trip into foundership, they don't really realize what this actually looks like. Right. And they're not getting advice. They're not getting the right advice. They've got things living in their blind spots. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way to help, first of all, it's not, the people that hire me, it's not a one meeting close ever. Even if they're referred to me, I don't close deals that fast because nor do I when I'm hiring someone, right? It's really important that people get to know you because I'm not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. I had somebody recently criticize somebody for saying, people who used to, it was a former Pro Bowl rider, that they'd talked to some people, that he used to compete with that didn't like him. And I thought, nobody can go through life without making some enemies. Come on now.
Right.
Yep.
I can assure you there's people out there that do not like me. And, I had somebody recently respond to a reach out about my executive roundtables that I run every 3 weeks-ish, saying that he was completely offended by my, I free hostages thing. And I thought, really? Huh. And I just, said, I'm, sorry about that. I mean, I thought, boy, are you judgmental? How else is that affecting you in your life being that judgmental?
Right.
Yeah.
So my point about telling you that, Shawn, in kind of a roundabout way, is that people have to be self-aware enough to even begin the conversation of transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're completely clueless, then I'm not so sure I can even get them there. to even have them hire me. Nor am I that necessarily interested in having them as a client.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that we've talked to a lot of people on our show, and the phrase that keeps coming up over and over again is like, I wasn't planning to build a business, right? It's so like they're accidental CEOs, right? So it's the kind of like it's like they walked off the cliff and they realized they have to build the plane or build the hang glider before they hit the ground and crash, And so it's like, well, who do I give this to? Who do I give this to? And so there's just that, it's that learning as you go kind of process. Yeah. And so I love how you kind of talk about that. But again, I go back to the visual, just so spot on with it.
Yeah. And that's why, I get people reach out to me all the time. Oh, I work with coaches and consultants. And I say, I'm not a coach. I'm not a consultant. Coaching is part of what I do because I'm a trained coach, but I'm not selling anybody my coaching services. I'm selling them a system that includes coaching. It includes all these other things that this 9-step process includes. And coaching's just a piece of it. A piece of it is what is training them how to do the search work they need to know how to do. It includes me going in and writing their position descriptions for them so they're actually right, and creating competency models so we know how to actually, I don't want to say judge, do performance reviews for our current people, and it also helps us hire new people. Because now we know what the competencies are. How important are those competencies to success? And, where does somebody come in on a scale of 1 to 5 in those competencies, right? So there's a lot of things that I've been doing for a very long time. So it's important to realize that it's not just one thing that can help a CEO founder fix their situation. It's several different things.
Yeah.
Right. It's having all these different tools to make you a better leader. It has all these different tools to help you focus on strategy blocks every day where nobody's going to bother you because you're the visionary to lead the company.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is like when you're a founder and you're kind of getting started, you don't really have a lot of people to talk to, right? Yeah. Like you don't know who to talk to about the mistakes. You don't know who to talk to about how do I figure this out? Because at that point in time, most of the people you're talking to are your clients. Maybe it's a family member who doesn't have a clue about how to run a business or how you do what you do. And so I think that's really a unique aspect of what you do, is that you do offer that coaching and that ability to be that sounding board for them to go, okay, this just happened. What the F do I do?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's always been music to my ears. I'll never forget the first time a CEO said that to me, a founder CEO, Carol, what should I do? Instead of answering him, I just responded with a question, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good coaching practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is, listen, sales 101, if you want to call it that, or even coaching 101 is, when somebody asks you an open-ended question, you respond with a question, right? And, what should I do is, I would say, kind of an open-ended question, because there's many different ways to answer that question. So I just responded with another question, and it helped him actually verbally walk himself through the process.
Yeah.
With my help. And that's where, when each of us has that aha moment on our own, rather than just being given the answer, it's far more impactful. Which isn't to say I don't give people the answers, because sometimes I just have to. How much time do you spend? Like, I'm not a therapist where I'm going to, have you give me a ton of money for, years and years and years, and you still never get to the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, for me, the big difference between coaching and therapy.
Yeah.
Eventually they're going to get, if I can't get you there myself to where I want to see you pick up from the blind spot that you're in, I'm going to eventually tell you. And it's, it may be 2 or 3 sessions down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's just, that's honestly really empowering to them. It's also very kind to them. They're not wasting time. You're just going, look, this is what I've experienced. Here's what I think you should do. Go get this help and then come to me.
Yeah. Go on.
You developed the Chief of Staff Scaffold system. It's it's a really unique approach. Can you give us a little bit of behind the scenes look at how the system came to life and why it works, especially for like entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So it came to life ultimately, I wrote a book, this book you mentioned, Powered by People, How Talent-Centric Organizations Master Recruitment, Retention, and Revenue, and How to Build One. That was published in June of 22, so 3.5 years ago, a little over. Ultimately, the Chief of Staff Scaffold system was born from that. Right. I had people telling me for years, Carol, you really should write a book. A buddy of mine told me in the early 2000s, Carol, I'm reading this book, such and such. I couldn't possibly remember it now. It's been too long. You should have written this book. You know more than this guy. I'm like, yeah, writing a book is not easy. and it's extremely time consuming. So it took, I probably should have done it 10 or 15 years sooner, but, shoulda, woulda, coulda. I can't dwell on that. And what I discovered was this. Founders say talent is important, but it's really them just blowing sunshine up their skirt and yours, okay? Because when you ask founders or founder CEOs, what their top 3 things in priority are, what do you think those 3 things are? Any guess?
Leads, revenue, and something else.
What was the first one?
Leads.
And then you said revenue and something else.
Revenue.
Yeah. So revenue was the first one. Product was the second one, right? Whatever you're selling. So maybe it's services for some people, but most people they interviewed were people who sold something. And coming in at number 3 was their people, and what they don't understand is if they put number 3 at number 1, number 2 and number 1 will follow.
Interesting. Okay.
Product and revenue will follow if you have the right people. But that was like pushing a boulder uphill. So the pivot for me, again, the system was already there. I just put it together in a whole different package where, I had my own chief of staff. It never dawned on me that that's what I should be doing.
Wow.
I mean, talk about blind spots. I was at the gym one morning talking to my buddy Ted, who's a fractional head of sales, been in sales his whole career. I was grousing about something. And he goes, Carol, you should be a fractional chief of staff. You know more about startups than anybody I know. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting idea. And we started vetting it out and ultimately realized, you know what? CEOs need this. And then one of my mentors said, I think you're on the wrong track, Carol, because why are small companies? I said, small companies need this as much as not more than the Fortune companies.
Yeah.
And we never looked back. So we did was repackage basically what I wrote in my book in a different way and built this 9-step process that is more marketable, it's more palatable, and how, I don't say, hey, hire me as your fractional chief of staff. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I sell outcomes.
Yeah.
You want to build your business? Great. You'll be able to do that with me. You're in too many meetings. Guess what? I'm going to go to every one of those meetings for you and alongside you, the ones that you need to be in. So that's an outcome is going to free a whole lot of your time. So all these things create the outcome of freeing their time. I mean, how many CEOs do you know that actually book out 2 or 3 hours of strategy time not to be bothered every day?
Nobody.
Yeah.
We posted about that this week, and somebody said he has just started doing that and what a difference it had made.
Yeah.
Bravo.
I've talked to a lot of people that it's like that's not something on their calendar.
That's right.
And the minute they do that, like their business dramatically change 6 months later.
The transformation.
Because they actually had the time to strategize to think about what were the roadblocks that they need to get around and to go through. And, it goes back to something you mentioned, about the 3 things, right? Your revenue, your leads, and your people, right? Like
product and your people.
Product and people. Yeah. So like those 3 things and people being at the bottom and it's like they think hiring will slow them down. Right? Like I have to take the time to hire somebody. I have to take the time to train them.
Right.
They see all the roadblocks that it creates versus seeing like what it's going to free up for them.
Right.
Right. So what advice would you give to a founder who kind of has that mentality or says, I can't afford to hire somebody right now?
As far as an employee?
Yes.
Yeah, that's hard. I'm pretty straight with people, and I would likely say to that person that you shouldn't be in business. Again, I said this early on in our conversation. If you are not prepared to spend some money or go into debt, then you should not be an entrepreneur. I really feel strongly about that. I mean, I went through practically my whole inheritance pivoting my business.
Wow.
And, it worried me to do that. And that's the reason I didn't that's the reason I didn't write the book and leave recruiting sooner. I was making a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
I had great clients. I was doing retained search, but I didn't want to do that anymore. I couldn't make the impact I can now.
Yeah.
So that journey led me to, some years of starving and taking a lot of debt on and so on and so forth. And, I'm willing to do that. Not everybody's willing to do that. And if you do it the right way, you will come out of it on the other side. If you've got something that people want and people need and they realize that, then you're fine. But Shawn, that's the only thing I can tell you. They should not be in business as an entrepreneur if they can't afford it. Because here's the thing. Have you ever been in a position where you're thinking, gosh, we really need a new car, but we can't afford one? And you buy one anyway. You figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
So the whole, I don't have the money, I call bullshit on that. I really do.
Yeah.
People always find the money for something they want.
Yeah, they do.
Yes,
Don't
they
they?
do. Yes, they do. And
So
I
you
think
have to
there's
call them out on it. You know,
Yeah.
I call bullshit on this.
Yeah, and I think there's something about being an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to stomach the risk,
That's
right?
Yeah.
And like you said, that's not for everybody, right?
No.
Like the bigger the company you want to be, the bigger you want to grow, the more
That's
risk
right.
is required
That's
for
right.
that. And you have to be able to kind of live with that on your shoulders as you go forward.
Yeah, you really do. And, you know, and of course, then as the company grows, the founder may or may not be the person to continue leading that company as a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's where founder syndrome comes into place, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like, well, it was my vision. I was the only one. Nobody else can take my place. No, there's other people that can take your place. I hate to break the news to you.
Yeah.
You can go become the chairman of the board and bring in a different CEO. I mean, in this world, do you think if Mark Zuckerberg did not own 51% of Meta, he would still be the CEO there? I would assert not a chance.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good
That's
question.
my assertion.
Mm-hmm.
Could I be wrong? Of course I could, but I think he's a terrible CEO.
Yeah, yeah. I was immediately thinking about like the Snapple piece of like when Snapple they came in and they fired the CEO. So, anyways, okay. So let's talk about failure, which is not a fun topic, but every entrepreneur has faced it, and you're really open about yours. Can you share how failure has shaped your leadership and changed the way that you run your business?
Yeah. Failure to me is another opportunity. And maybe that's just because I was in sales for so many years. You get more no's than you do yeses. So I kind of, you think of those no's as failures and those yeses as wins. So I've made mistakes, plenty of them. And, years ago, I'll never forget, this was when I was still at the search firm. And because I was with the contingent firms before moving into retained work, right? I wasn't getting a salary, so it was all a big risk. And, they yanked me into their office one day, as they often did for me doing something stupid or, but I wouldn't hear about it till 6 months later, and said to me one day, we got this letter back in those days from this guy candidate I had talked to. And he said, you accused him of being a liar and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, what the F? That's totally not true. But the guy had told me a story, and you know how sometimes somebody tells you something so unbelievable, you're like, there's no way that could have happened, even though they're not lying to you. Well, he interpreted that as being me having lied to him. And they said, first of all, if you even say anything to the guy that we said anything to you, or if this ever happens again, you're gone. And, so I you have to start to look at and think, okay, so why did that failure happen? Right? Because I consider that a failure. And, what then gets me up to pull up my boots back on and, and step forward out of that? Well, partly it's my own stick-to-itiveness, but, I've been in that position where I've pissed people off. And when that started to change for me, so I'm going to have to digress a minute because there's reasons behind that, was in my coaching work when my coach said to me, I started in 1998. This was pre 9/11. So it was probably in 2000 that this happened. I was coaching my first program. We were sitting in the bar of building one of the World Trade Center, and he put down his drink. It was at the end of our Saturday. There was the whole coaching team was down there eating and drinking. And he said, Carol, you have trust and intimacy issues. It was like the light bulb went ding, 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 ding over my head. And I thought, shit, of course I do. How have I never seen this before? So for me, that didn't mean I didn't still fail in areas, but it allowed me to start putting structures in place to manage those trust and intimacy issues so they didn't stop getting in the way of me being, a great salesperson, a great leader, which I was a shitty leader. It was horrible. People hated working for me. Those were all, I consider all those to be failures along the road to where I am now. As an entrepreneur now, as the founder and CEO of Vertical Elevation, I haven't had a lot of failures. If I lost deals, of course I have. But I know how to manage all this stuff so much better now because of the work I did so long ago that I continue to do, I might add. It's not like all of a sudden you have an epiphany that you have trust and intimacy issues and all of a sudden, poof, everything's okay. Because that is just not how it works.
Yeah.
So I've had to maintain that support.
Yeah,
along the
and
way.
that's really important, to be able to do that. And I think a lot of our audience, they're small business owners, they're
Yes.
in the grind.
Yes.
They haven't figured out what their exit strategy is yet,
Well.
right? Like they're still kind of stuck in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say to somebody who's kind of in that spot? Their business is going okay, it's surviving, but it's not really thriving. They're not necessarily hugely profitable. What advice would you give them to kind of start thinking of like that?
Well, I would ask a question, which is, do you know the difference between want and commitment? Want,
that's a great
there's a
question.
very distinct difference. Okay, want is, I want to sell my business for $30 million. I want that too, but am I putting the structures in place, and do I have the commitment to bring that to fruition? Commitment is going and going and going in the face of failure, no, losing deals, things aren't working the way you think they should. That's the difference between want and commitment. Commitment, you just keep going, putting one foot in front of the other. So my first question is, what do they want and what are they committed to? Because Shawn, if they're not truly committed to, if they're in that place of, that you're describing, kind of ho-hum, we're not really growing, we're not really getting anywhere. Well, what are you looking to get out of your business? And are you actually committed to getting it there? Because if you're committed to it, so like I said, that's why I have to lay out the distinction between these two things so they get it.
Yeah.
If you're truly committed to this, then what do you need to do to make that happen?
Yeah.
What are the changes you need to make that happen?
Yeah,
I can tell them, my old boss, when I was learning how to recruit, said to me, you're the doctor, they're the patient, tell them what to do. I said, yeah, I understand that. I still tell people what to do, but I don't do that you have to have a relationship with that person, or they're just not going to listen to you. They have to understand that I am the expert. They have to trust me. And that takes time to build.
It does. And I think there's something you said there, about the want versus commitment.
Yeah.
And I've heard it said before that, are you willing to become the person that it takes to get to that level or to get to where you want to be?
Yes.
Are you willing to change yourself enough to put in the habits and be the person that can get something to that level?
Yeah. I mean, it's just the same side of a different, different side of the same coin, or same side of a different coin, or forget how that goes. Yeah, that's really what that is. People they have to just make that decision to commit, period. And if you do, you keep going. And that's where, I've had sleepless nights. And there have been times where I just didn't sleep at all. And I'm like, I've got to start sleeping. I can't get through this because of the stress. And, whether that's me leaving a very lucrative search practice to pivoting a business to what I do now, that did not happen overnight. Many sleepless nights, lots of stress, blood pressure, all sorts of horrible things, put on weight, all these things, right? And I finally had to have, the veritable come to Jesus meeting with myself and say, listen, get your shit together.
Yeah.
You know what's important to you. And, but I have great mental strength to be able to do that. And I, had the help of a coach to do that also. Somebody to help hold you accountable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've coached, you built, you scaled, you're still evolving. As a person, I appreciate your transparency. You're evolving as a business. What's one thing you're still learning as an entrepreneur yourself, and where do you feel your growth edge is right now? What do you think you're still learning as an entrepreneur yourself, and where do you feel your own growth edge is right now?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And this is something I've been looking at a lot recently, which is, I built this fantastic women's leadership program called Women Ascending. Took 6 months to build it. I haven't even begun to sell it. I built it, 3 years ago, right? So looking at, when my mentor says to me, Carol, there are way other things you should also be doing, create more revenue streams for you, which I understand. And sometimes I'm like, I'm so exhausted. I don't have time to do it. And then I, remind myself of what I, tell other people to do in the practice what you preach realm of that, which is to get the structure, get the support I need to be able to bring this through to fruition. Right. So we're just starting that with the Women's Leadership Program. My chief of staff, all of a sudden, with all the work we've been doing, people who want to be chiefs of staff, people who are chiefs of staff, all of a sudden are starting to book all these calls with me. And I'm thinking, this is really interesting. So now my chief of staff said, well, Carol, you really should start running a group.
There you go.
for chiefs of staff. And I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. Let's get on that first of the year. So that's, I would say that's where I'm evolving, which is, somebody saying, Carol, you should do this. And I'm like, I don't have the time. I'm exhausted. I've got 5 horses, 2 of which I need to train because they're both babies. I'm like, when am I going to find time for all this? Yeah. And that's where I practice my own advice, which is bringing the people in who can help me get this done, where I can free my time to do the things that I do. Right. I mean, I'm getting close to the point where I'm going to have to start hiring chiefs of staff to do what I do and go in fractionally. I can't do this in perpetuity.
Right.
And I'm very close to having to do that. So I have to start thinking about, okay, I need to hire my own employees who are fractional chiefs of staff that I can send out and put my system into place.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Carol, this has been such an amazing conversation.
No, thank you.
How can people get in touch with you for everything that you offer? How can they get in touch with you?
The best place to find me is verticalelevation.com. All the information is there. You can book a call with me. You can email me. All my information is on there. Super easy to find me. But that's the best place to start.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, your insight. I'm going to be re-listening to this again. There's so many good nuggets of information there. So thank you for being a guest with us, and have a great day.
My pleasure.